The first sensation was rust. Not the taste. Eren had long since grown accustomed to blood in his mouth, but the smell, thick and cloying, mixed with chemical runoff and the unmistakable stench of human degradation multiplied by millions. His eyes opened to darkness punctuated by sickly yellow lights that flickered like dying stars, casting long shadows across corrugated metal walls that stretched upward into an impossible distance. He pushed himself to his feet, every muscle in his body screaming protest, though whether from his arrival or from the memory of his last moments. Mikasa's blade, her tears, the weight of everything he had done. He could not say. The ground beneath him was not earth but grated metal, slick with substances he had no desire to identify. Around him, the darkness was alive with sound. The grinding of distant machinery, the hiss of steam vents, the murmur of countless voices speaking in a language that somehow resolved itself in his mind, though he knew he had never heard it before. Eren's hand went instinctively to his mouth, biting down on his thumb hard enough to draw blood. The familiar lightning should have come, the explosive transformation into the founding titan, but instead there was only pain and the slow drip of blood onto the metal grating. He bit harder, channeling every ounce of will into the transformation, feeling the power coiled within him like a serpent ready to strike. Nothing. The titan remained dormant, locked behind a door he could not find. Not dead then, he muttered to himself, the word strange in his ears. Just somewhere else. The paths, that infinite dimension where all Eldians connected across time, felt distant. Not gone, but muffled, as if someone had wrapped it in layers of thick cloth. He could sense it there, a ghost of a sensation at the edge of his consciousness, but when he reached for it, his mind encountered something else. Something vast and oppressive that pressed against his thoughts with the weight of an ocean. He forced himself to focus on his surroundings. He was in some kind of corridor, though corridor felt inadequate for the scale. The walls stretched up 50 feet or more before disappearing into shadow and industrial pipework. Cables as thick as his torso snaked along the ceiling, crackling with electricity. The metal grating beneath his feet was worn smooth in places, suggesting countless footsteps over countless years. And everywhere, that same symbol. A skull bisected by an ornate eye. Eren staggered forward, his legs weak, his head pounding with a migraine that felt like his skull was trying to split open from the inside. Blood ran from his nose, his ears. His Survey Corps uniform was shredded, barely clinging to his frame, and he realized with cold detachment that he was unarmed. No blades, no ODM gear. Nothing but his body and whatever remained of his titan powers. The voices grew louder as he moved, not from ahead, but from below. Through gaps in the grating, he caught glimpses of movement in the levels beneath. Masses of humanity packed so tightly they seemed like a single organism, shuffling through passages barely wide enough for their shoulders. Their clothes were rags, their faces were hollow, and many bore brands. Symbols burned into their foreheads and cheeks that matched the markings on the walls. Another cage, Eren thought, his jaw tightening. Another wall, just bigger than the last. A sound echoed through the corridor. Footsteps, heavy and measured, accompanied by that rhythmic clanking like chains dragging across metal. Eren pressed himself against the wall, searching for an alcove, a doorway, anything. There, a recess 20 feet ahead, partially hidden behind a tangle of cables and a support beam. He moved toward it, forcing his legs to obey despite the weakness in his muscles, the lingering vertigo from whatever had brought him here. He'd almost reached it when the footsteps rounded the corner behind him. Eren turned. It was a procession. At its head walked men in robes of dirty white, their heads shaved, their eyes glazed with the look of people who'd stopped thinking for themselves long ago. They carried candles that guttered in the recycled air, and they were chanting, that same incomprehensible language resolving itself in Eren's mind. Sanctus Imperator Protegat Nos. Sanctus Imperator Protegat Nos. Behind them came the masses. Dozens of people, men, women, children. dressed in rags that might have once been fine clothing. Their faces bore the same brands as those Eren had seen below. Some had shaved their heads. Others had driven nails through their palms. And all of them were chanting, their voices building in volume and intensity as they approached. They saw him and stopped. 50 pairs of eyes locked onto Eren with an intensity that raised every hair on his neck. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. The chanting cut off mid-word, leaving only the distant grinding of machinery and the hiss of steam. Then they knelt, all of them, as one, dropping to the grated metal hard enough that Eren heard kneecaps crack. Their heads bowed, their hands clasped in prayer, fingers interlaced, pressed against their chests. And they began to chant again, louder now, more frenzied. Sanctus Imperator Protegat Numbers. Sanctus Imperator Protegat Numbers. Sanctus Imperator Protegat Nos. Stop! Eren's voice cut through the chanting. Didn't. I said stop. They didn't stop. Their voices rose higher, some weeping now, tears cutting tracks through the grime on their faces, others laughing, a sound like breaking glass. The pressure against Eren's mind intensified, that vast presence turning its attention toward this place, drawn by the noise or the blood or the simple fact of his presence. A child broke from the group. Couldn't have been older than 10, rail-thin, with brands covering both cheeks and a rope around his neck. He ran at Eren with his hands outstretched, still chanting, his eyes wide and glassy and utterly empty of anything Eren would call sanity. Eren caught the boy's wrists on reflex. The child didn't struggle. He just kept chanting, kept staring, his lips moving mechanically as if the words were being pulled from his throat by strings. What did they do to you? Eren whispered. The boy's mouth stretched wider, impossibly wide, and he said in perfectly clear words that cut through the chanting, "The angel comes to test our faith." Then he bit down on his own tongue hard enough to sever it. Eren recoiled, releasing the child, who collapsed to the grating, still trying to chant through the ruin of his mouth. Blood pooled beneath him, dripping through the gaps to the levels below. The other civilians didn't react. They just kept praying, their voices building to a fever pitch, and now Eren could feel it. That pressure against his mind becoming unbearable, something vast pressing down on him like the weight of the sky. Gunfire shattered the moment. Not the crack of rifles Eren knew. This was deeper, heavier. Each shot a thunderclap that left his ears ringing. The civilians chanting cut off as their bodies jerked and burst. Not bullet wounds but explosions that left craters where torsos had been. In 3 seconds, the entire group was dead or dying, their remains painting the metal grating in reds and purples and colors Eren had no names for. Through the corridor's junction strode their killers. Women, armored head to toe in black ceramite chased with gold and crimson, their breastplates molded with the same two-headed eagle symbol. They moved with military precision, flammers and bolters held at the ready, their faces hidden behind helmets sculpted to resemble screaming angels. 20 of them formed a firing line, weapons trained on Eren's position. Behind them came something worse. She wore white robes over her armor, and her head was bare. A woman's face, hard and scarred, framed by hair the color of old iron. In one hand she carried a chainsword, its teeth already slick with blood. In the other, a book bound in what looked like human skin. Her eyes found Eren and she smiled. "Heretic," she said, and her voice carried the absolute certainty of a judge pronouncing a death sentence. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, you are found guilty of existence. Your sentence is obliteration. Your ashes will be scattered. Your name will be forgotten." She raised the chainsword. "Fire!" 20 bolters spoke as one. Eren bit his hand. The lightning came. Not the full transformation. Eren's connection to the paths was still strangled, muffled under that crushing psychic weight. But enough. Enough for his body to remember what it was supposed to be. His bones elongated, muscles erupted from his frame in corded masses, and steam exploded outward in a scalding wave that flash-boiled the air itself. The bolter rounds hit his partially formed Titan body and detonated. Mass-reactive shells designed to penetrate ceramite armor and explode inside the target found flesh that was already regenerating faster than they could destroy it. Chunks of meat and muscle blew away from Eren's torso. His right arm disintegrated at the elbow, but new tissue was already writhing into place, knitting together with wet, organic sounds. He stood 12 feet tall, not his full 15 meters, barely a quarter of his attack titan's true size, a grotesque hybrid of human and monster. His face was half-formed, one eye human-sized and wild, the other a dinner plate orb with a slit pupil. His jaw had extended but not completed, leaving his mouth a lipless gash filled with too many teeth. The armored women didn't hesitate. They advanced, chanting something in that same incomprehensible language, their voices perfectly synchronized. In his name we shall not falter. In his light we shall not fall. Flammers roared. Gouts of promethium washed over Eren's incomplete Titan form, the chemical fire clinging to his flesh and burning deep. He could feel it consuming him faster than he could regenerate, the pain white-hot and absolute, but he'd felt worse. He'd felt himself burned alive in Liberio. He'd felt his body shredded by the Warhammer Titan's spikes. Pain was just information, and information told him he was going to die here if he didn't move. Eren lunged forward with speed that shouldn't have been possible for something his size, his remaining hand sweeping out in a backhand that caught 3 of the armored women and sent them flying. They hit the corridor's metal walls with wet crunches, impacts that should have liquefied anyone inside the armor, but 2 of them were already rising, limbs bent at wrong angles, still chanting, still raising their weapons. What are they? No time. The woman in white was moving, closing the distance with inhuman speed, her chain's word screaming as it carved through the air. Eren tried to dodge, but his half-formed body was clumsy, unbalanced, and the blade caught him across the ribs. Monomolecular teeth chewed through Titan flesh and bit into the human body beneath, spraying blood and steam in equal measure. Eren roared, a sound that was half-human scream, half-Titan bellow, and brought his fist down where the woman had been. She'd already moved, rolling aside with the grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime fighting things larger than herself. Her free hand snapped up and made a gesture, 2 fingers extended toward Eren's face. Light erupted from the icon around her neck, that same 2-headed eagle symbol, and it burned. Not fire. Something that felt like fire but attacked Eren on a level deeper than flesh, searing through whatever half-connection he still had to the paths, making him feel the distance between himself and the dimension that was supposed to be his to command. His regeneration stuttered, slowed. The wounds from the chain's word remained open, weeping blood and steam. Behold! The woman's voice boomed through the corridor, amplified by something in her armor. The creature reveals its nature. Mark well, sisters. This is the face of the demon, the enemy of all that is pure and holy. Demon? Eren didn't know the word, but he understood enemy. He understood the killing intent radiating from these women, the absolute certainty in their movements. They weren't afraid of him. They weren't even particularly angry. They were performing a duty, and that made them more dangerous than any Marleyan soldier. More bolter fire, more promethium. Eren's body was disintegrating faster than it could heal, the flames eating through muscle down to the human core that housed his consciousness. He could feel the transformation failing, his Titan form beginning to collapse. And then the light changed. The flickering yellow lamps guttered, their light bending sideways toward nothing, pulled by a wind that didn't exist. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost cracked across the metal grating in spreading patterns that looked almost like script. The armored women stopped. For the first time, Eren saw hesitation in their movements. The one in white raised her hand, halting the firing line, her head turning to scan the shadows. "Warp breach," she said, her voice tight.
Défensive formation.
"Shield the..." The wall beside Eren exploded, not with force, With wrongness, the metal didn't shatter. It unfolded, geometry inverting on itself. And through the impossible space that opened came something that made Eren's half-formed Titan eye bleed just from seeing it. A shape, roughly humanoid, 7, maybe 8 feet tall, wrapped in robes that were simultaneously purple and green and colors Eren was certain didn't exist. Its face, if it had a face, was hidden behind a mask of tarnished silver carved with symbols that moved, rearranging themselves faster than thought. Where it walked, the metal beneath its feet turned to glass, to sand, to something that looked like frozen screaming. It carried a staff topped with a flame that burned backward, consuming light instead of producing it. And it was laughing. "Oh, what delicious confusion," the thing said, its voice layered with harmonics that made Eren's brain itch. A child of flesh playing at godhood, stumbling into the underhive like a lost lamb. "Tell me, little Titan, do you even understand where you are? What you've stumbled into?" The woman in white moved before Eren could process the words. She blurred, closing 30 feet in a heartbeat, her chain's word arcing toward the robed figure's neck with precision born of centuries of practice. The blade passed through empty air. The figure was behind her, staff raised, and that backward burning flame touched the woman's armor. Nothing happened for a moment. Then her ceramite began to age. Decades of wear appeared in seconds, century-old cracks spreading across the breastplate, rust blooming like cancer, and the woman was stumbling back, her armor crumbling to powder even as she tore it off her body. "Sorcery!" she screamed, and now there was fear in her voice, raw and primal. "Witch, spawn of the architect of fate. Sisters, purge it with fire." The flammers roared again, 20 streams of promethium converging on the robed figure. It raised one hand. No, not a hand, Eren realized with mounting horror, but something with too many fingers, or maybe not enough, and the flames bent. They curved around the figure in perfect parabolas and splashed back toward the armored women, who threw themselves aside with desperate speed. "Always so dramatic," the figure sighed. "So committed to your scripts. Has it ever occurred to you faithful ones that the universe might be more interesting if you occasionally improvised?" It turned back to Eren, and though he couldn't see eyes behind that shifting mask, he felt the weight of its attention like a physical pressure. "You," it said, "you're the anomaly, the variable that wasn't supposed to be. Do you know what you've done? The hole you've torn in the skin of reality? The War Master's calculations are ruined. 9,000 years of planning, and a boy with delusions of freedom comes crashing through the immaterium like a stone through stained glass." Eren's Titan form was collapsing, the regeneration finally giving out. He felt himself shrinking, his body reverting to human dimensions, the steam dissipating to reveal his naked, burned form crouched on the grating. Blood ran from every orifice. His vision was graying at the edges. But he met that hidden gaze and forced words through his ruined throat. "I don't know what you are. I don't know where this is. But if you're another wall," he coughed blood, "another cage, then I'll tear you down too." The figure tilted its head. "Magnificent," it breathed. "You mean it. You actually believe you can fight a galaxy, fight gods themselves. The architect will find you fascinating." It raised its staff. The woman in white was suddenly there, her chain's word, somehow intact, somehow still screaming, plunging into the figure's back and erupting from its chest in a spray of liquid that might have been blood but moved like oil and smelled like burned copper. The figure looked down at the blade protruding from its torso. "Rude," it said. Then it popped like a soap bubble. Not exploded, not teleported, simply ceased to exist, leaving nothing behind but the fading echo of laughter, and a symbol burned into the metal grating. A spiral within a spiral, angles that hurt to comprehend. The woman stood there, chainsword raised, breathing hard. Her armor was gone, leaving her in the black body glove beneath. Scars covered every visible inch of her skin, burns, lacerations, brands that formed prayers in that incomprehensible language. She turned to Eren. "You," she said slowly, carefully, as if speaking to a wild animal, "are either the most powerful psyker I have encountered in 30 years of service, or you are something far, far worse." She raised a small device from her belt, a cylinder of black metal covered in wax seals and purity marks, and spoke into it. "Canonis Junith to Ordo Hereticus Priority Alpha Crimson. I have encountered an entity of unknown origin in the Tertius Underhive demonstrating Titan-class biomancy and apparent warp resistance. Entity engaged hostile Tsientian manifestation and survived. Requesting immediate inquisitorial assessment before I am forced to administer final sanction." Static crackled from the device. Then a voice, male, old, with the rasping quality of someone who'd breathed too much incense smoke. "Acknowledged, Canonis. Containment protocols authorized. Inquisitor Voke will arrive within the hour. Do not allow the entity to expire before assessment. We have questions." The woman Canonis lowered the device. She studied Eren for a long moment, this naked, burned, bleeding boy thing that had somehow survived an engagement with her entire squad and a demon. "Tell me," she said quietly, "can you understand me?" Eren tried to speak. His throat was raw, his tongue thick with blood. But he forced out 2 words in a language that wasn't his but that his mind had somehow begun parsing from context. "Freedom or death." The Canonis actually smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "In the Imperium of Man," she said, "there is no difference." She struck him across the temple with the pommel of her chain's word, and Eren's world went black. Eren woke to the smell of burning skin. His own. He was upright. No, not upright, suspended. His wrists and ankles clamped in manacles that hummed with a low vibration he could feel in his bones. The metal was cold against his skin, cold enough to hurt, and thin wisps of steam rose from the contact points where his body's residual healing attempted to cope with whatever the restraints were doing to him. The room was small, cramped, walls of bare metal covered in more of those eagle symbols. These ones cast in bronze and positioned at precise intervals as if their placement mattered. A single light source, a globe of pale yellow luminescence, hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly despite the absence of any wind. And there was a man. He sat in a chair too small for his frame, his hunched posture suggesting age but not weakness. He wore robes of deep red trimmed with black fur, and over them armor, segments of dull gray plate at the shoulders, chest, and shins, each piece engraved with skulls and script. His face was a roadmap of scar tissue and augmentation. One eye replaced by a lens of green glass that clicked and whirred as it focused on Eren, the other milky with cataracts. His head was shaved, revealing a port-scarred scalp studded with metal nodes. Between them sat a table. On it, Eren's Survey Corps jacket, laid flat, a vial of his blood, and a device that looked like a metal spider, its legs twitching occasionally. "You're awake," the man said. His voice was exactly as Eren remembered from the device, old, rasping, but carrying absolute authority. "Good." The Canonis was concerned she'd struck you too hard. I assured her your regenerative capabilities would compensate. Eren tested the manacles. They didn't budge. He tried to summon the transformation, biting down on the inside of his cheek hard enough to split it. Pain lanced through his skull, white-hot and immediate. Not from the wound, from everywhere, as if his entire nervous system had been set on fire. He gasped, his body convulsing against the restraints. "Please don't," the man said mildly. "The psychic dampeners in those manacles are calibrated to punish attempts at drawing on warp energy. If you continue, they'll cook your brain from the inside. It's a rather unpleasant way to die, and I need you functional for this conversation." Eren forced his breathing to slow. The pain receded to a dull throb. He focused on the man, on his surroundings, searching for anything he could use. "Where am I?" "The Sanctum Celestis Ordo Fortress, Inquisitorial Detention Level 3. Though you arrived in the planet's underhive, the industrial bowels where the faithful masses labor in his name. The man leaned forward, his mechanical eye adjusting with a soft whir. My name is Inquisitor Octavius Voke of the Ordo Hereticus. My purpose is to determine whether you are human, xenos, or demon, and whether you deserve execution, experimentation, or immediate termination with extreme prejudice. He picked up the vial of Eren's blood, holding it to the light. Your cellular structure is fascinating. Regenerative capabilities that exceed even what we see in Space Marine Primera stock. The samples I've taken suggest your DNA is unstable, mutable, as if portions of your genome are actively rewriting themselves. I'm human, Eren said flatly. Are you? Voke set down the vial and tapped a finger on Eren's jacket. This material, synthetic weave, advanced polymer threading, but the composition doesn't match any imperial manufacturing pattern. The dyes use chemical processes we haven't employed in over 3,000 years. And these, he pointed to the embroidered wings, the wings of freedom symbol. Tell me what they mean. Eren said nothing. The canoness reported you engaged in biomantic transformation under extreme stress. Your body became something other, larger, stronger, capable of regenerating catastrophic damage. This matches historical accounts of warp-touched mutation or sanctioned psyker manifestation. Voke's human eye narrowed. Yet you show no signs of warp taint. No corruption markers. The canoness's blessed weapons didn't trigger against you as they would against a demon. You're an anomaly. He stood, his joints creaking, and circled around Eren's suspended form. I've served the Ordo Hereticus for 63 years. I have interrogated gene stealers and chaos cultists, rogue psychers and fallen tech priests. I have seen things that would shatter an ordinary man's sanity. But you... He stopped directly behind Eren, his voice dropping to a whisper. You are something new. And in the Imperium, new is synonymous with threat. Eren felt the man's augmented eye against the back of his skull, heard the lens adjusting, focusing on something. Your brain structure, Voke murmured. There are anomalies, regions of hyperactivity that suggest either psychic potential or something else. Memory engrams far denser than should be possible. It's as if you're carrying multiple lifetimes of experience in a body that's barely seen 2 decades. The paths Eren realized. He's seeing the memories, the future memories, the past inheritors. Tell me, Voke said, coming back around to face him. Where are you from? And I don't mean what Hive City or Agri-World. I mean where. Because I don't think you're from this galaxy at all. Eren met his gaze, both the human eye and the mechanical one. Would it matter? To my assessment? Yes. To your survival. Voke smiled, revealing teeth that had been replaced with metal replicas. Probably not. But I'm old, boy. I've earned the right to satisfy my curiosity before I do my duty. Silence stretched between them. Eren could hear his own heartbeat, the hum of the manacles, the distant sound of chanting from somewhere else in the fortress. That same chant the civilians had been screaming in the underhive before the armored women massacred them. This place, Eren said slowly, everyone I've seen, they worship something, someone. This emperor, the god emperor of mankind, Voke corrected. Master of the Imperium, Lord of Terra, he who sits upon the golden throne. By his will alone do we endure in a galaxy that wants us dead. By his light do we hold back the darkness. Every man, woman, and child across 1,000,000 worlds knows his name and gives thanks for his eternal vigil. Eren thought of the civilians with brands burned into their faces, the child who'd bitten off his own tongue, the armored women who'd advanced into his attacks without fear, chanting prayers even as their bodies broke. The masses he'd glimpsed through the grating, packed so tightly in the underhive's lower levels they could barely move. They're slaves, he said. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Voke's expression didn't change. They're faithful. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Eren's voice hardened. I've seen this before. People who cage themselves. Who let others tell them what to think, how to live, when to die. Who call their chains duty or destiny. And convince themselves that slavery is freedom. And what would you know of freedom? Voke asked softly. Everything. Eren leaned forward as far as the manacles allowed, his eyes burning. I was born in a cage. Raised inside walls that kept us penned like livestock. Told we were protected. Told we were safe. And then one day the walls broke and we learned the truth. We weren't being protected. We were being preserved. Kept alive for someone else's purpose. He bared his teeth. So I tore down the walls. All of them. I made myself strong enough that no one could cage me ever again. And when the people on the other side of those walls tried to build new ones, tried to put me back in my place, I decided to tear down their walls too. All of them. Every single one. Voke listened in silence. When Eren finished, the Inquisitor returned to his chair and sat heavily. You're a tyrant, he said finally. You've cloaked yourself in the rhetoric of freedom, but what you describe is conquest. The imposition of your will upon others. The elimination of everyone who doesn't conform to your vision. They were trying to eliminate us, Eren shot back. My people were slaughtered for thousands of years. Kept ignorant, kept weak, kept guilty for crimes we didn't commit. We had two choices, die or fight back. I chose to fight. By committing genocide. Eren didn't flinch. Yes. Voke nodded slowly, as if Eren had confirmed something. Then you'll understand when I tell you that the Imperium has made the same choice. Humanity is surrounded on all sides by Xenos empires that view us as prey, vermin, or raw materials. We are beset by demons from beyond reality that want to corrupt our souls and feast on our suffering. We are betrayed from within by heretics and mutants who would tear down everything we've built. That was necessary, Voke finished. A tragic but unavoidable cost? The price of true freedom. He laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. Boy, you sound exactly like every other ideologue I've ever interrogated. The only difference is that you had the power to actually attempt it. He leaned forward. So we fight. We purge. We conquer. We impose order on a galaxy drowning in chaos. And yes, we demand faith. We demand obedience. We demand sacrifice. Because the alternative is extinction. That's what they said about us, Eren said quietly. That we were a threat. That we had to be eliminated for the greater good. That our existence endangered everyone else. His voice dropped to a near whisper. They were lying. They were just afraid. Afraid of losing control. Perhaps, Voke conceded. But tell me, in your crusade for freedom, how many innocents died? How many people who had nothing to do with your suffering were crushed under your feet? Eren's jaw tightened. He saw them again, the civilians of Liberio, screaming as his titan form crashed through their homes. The refugees fleeing the rumbling, trampled by colossal titans that didn't even register their existence.
Millions.
Billions, eventually, if he'd completed the plan. That was necessary, Voke finished. A tragic but unavoidable cost? The price of true freedom. He laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. Boy, you sound exactly like every other ideologue I've ever interrogated. The only difference is that you had the power to actually attempt it. He stood again, picking up the spider device from the table. Its legs twitched more actively now, as if excited. I'm going to show you something, Voke said. The canonists wanted me to simply execute you and be done with it. But I think you deserve to see what your philosophy looks like when taken to its logical conclusion. When freedom becomes absolute. He pressed a stud on the device. The walls of the cell flickered. No, not the walls. The space inside the cell flickered, and suddenly Eren was seeing through them. His vision extending beyond the metal into corridors, chambers, rising through the underhive's industrial levels, past the mid-spires where the faithful gathered in their millions, and finally out into the open air above the fortress. He saw the planet, Sanctum Celestis, a world of cathedrals and shrines, its surface covered in structures built to glorify that emperor figure. Billions of people living in those structures and in the industrial depths beneath, all of them praying, all of them willing participants in this system that Voke claimed was salvation. And he saw what was coming for them. The sky was tearing. A wound in reality itself. A vast gash that bled colors Eren had no names for. Through it poured things. Creatures that defied description, that existed in too many dimensions, that wore shapes like mockery. Some looked almost human but stretched, elongated, their limbs bending in extra joints. Others were composed of geometric impossibilities. Angles that hurt to perceive, surfaces that reflected light from places light didn't come from. They were descending on the planet in their thousands. And wherever they touched ground, reality changed. Stone flowed like water. Gravity inverted. People's bodies turned inside out or simply unraveled. Their flesh becoming ribbons of screaming matter that danced on non-existent winds. This, Voke said quietly, is what happens when the warp breaches containment, when the barriers between our reality and the realm of pure thought, pure emotion, pure chaos break down. Those things you see, they're demons, entities born from the worst aspects of sentient consciousness given form. They don't want to conquer us. They don't want to enslave us. They want to play with us, to reshape us into living sculptures of agony and madness for their own amusement. Eren watched, unable to look away, as one of the cathedrals collapsed. Not from structural damage. Its very geometry was being rewritten, its angles becoming impossible, its occupants absorbed into the changing architecture until there was no distinction between flesh and stone. The Imperium's faith, Voke continued, is a weapon. It's psychological armor against this. When a man truly believes, when he has anchored his identity to something external and absolute, it's harder for the warp to touch him. Harder for demons to corrupt him. Is it oppressive? Yes. Is it cruel? Often. But it works. It keeps humanity human in a galaxy that wants to turn us into playthings for hungry gods. The vision cut off. Eren was back in the cell, his heart hammering, sweat running down his face despite the cold. Your freedom, Voke said, would be their paradise. A galaxy where every individual pursues their own will without limit, without restraint, without faith to bind them. That's not freedom. That's fuel. That's every human soul screaming its desires and fears into the warp, feeding the very entities we're trying to starve. He set the device back on the table and studied Eren's face. So here's my assessment. You are human. Demonstrably so. But you are also dangerous. Your power is significant, and your philosophy is toxic. If I release you, you'll fight. You'll tear down the systems you see as oppressive. And in doing so, you'll weaken the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. He drew a weapon from his robes, a pistol angular and brutal, with a bore wide enough to fit Eren's thumb. The Imperium has a saying, innocence proves nothing. It means that good intentions don't matter. Only results. Only survival. He aimed the weapon at Eren's forehead. I could execute you right now. One bolt shell through the brain, another through the heart, then incinerate the remains. Clean. Simple. Safe. Eren stared down the barrel. He'd been here before, facing death, facing judgment, knowing that a single decision would determine everything. He thought about Armin, Mikasa, the others. He thought about parity. He thought about the rumbling and whether it had even continued after he'd been torn away. And he thought about what Voke had just shown him. Those things pouring through the tear in reality, unmaking everything they touched. If that was what existed here, if that was the threat this Imperium faced, no, it didn't matter. He'd seen tyranny justify itself with existential threats before. That's what Marley had done. That's what the Tiber family had done. They'd used fear to maintain control, used the threat of Titans to keep Eldians subjugated. This was the same thing, just a bigger wall. "Do it," Eren said. Voke's finger tightened on the trigger. Then he lowered the weapon. "No," the Inquisitor said, "because there's one more thing I need to test. One more question I need answered." He holstered the pistol and reached into his robes, producing a small object wrapped in black cloth. He unwrapped it carefully, reverently, revealing a book. No, a fragment of a book. A single page, yellowed with age, covered in handwritten script. Even from a distance, even through his exhaustion and pain, Eren could feel something emanating from it. Presence. A weight. "This," Voke said softly, "is a page from the Lectitio Divinitatis, one of the earliest texts describing the divinity of the God Emperor, written during the Horus Heresy 10,000 years ago. It is a holy relic. It has been touched by saints and carried into battle by heroes. It radiates faith the way a flame radiates heat." He held it up before Eren's face. "If you are truly human, truly untainted, it will not harm you. You may feel discomfort. The faithless often do, but nothing more." His mechanical eye focused, clicking through apertures. "But if you are corrupted, if there is warp taint in your soul even you don't know about, this will burn you. It will sear through any illusion, any disguise. It will reveal the truth." He brought the page closer. Closer. Eren felt it like pressure against his skin, a sensation that was neither hot nor cold but wrong, as if the page was pushing against reality itself. His vision blurred. His head pounded. That distant connection to the paths, already tenuous, felt like it was being crushed, squeezed by an invisible fist. The page touched his forehead.
Eren skramat.
Not from physical pain, though there was that, a burning sensation like acid eating into his skin. He screamed because he could see it. A vast golden figure seated on a throne of machinery and suffering. Its form too bright to look at directly, its presence crushing and absolute. He could feel its attention, its judgment, a consciousness so vast and ancient that Eren's entire existence was less than a mote of dust in comparison. And he could hear it. Not words, not language, but intent, burning into his mind. "You do not belong here." The page pulled away. Eren sagged in his restraints, gasping, blood running from his nose and eyes. The skin of his forehead was marked. Not burned, but branded. A faint outline of the two-headed eagle that faded even as he watched. Voke studied him in silence. Then he rewrapped the page and returned it to his robes. "Interesting," the Inquisitor murmured. The relic reacted, but not with rejection, not with the fury it shows toward true corruption. It reacted with confusion, as if it encountered something it didn't understand, something that shouldn't exist within its framework. He leaned close, his human eye searching Eren's face. "You're not from this galaxy," Voke said with absolute certainty. "You're not even from this reality. Whatever method brought you here, it tore you from your own universe and deposited you in ours. The warp rift we detected in the Underhive, the anomalous readings, you're not the cause. You're a symptom, a piece of foreign matter lodged in the body of this universe." He straightened. "Which presents me with a unique problem. I can't simply execute you. You might be a resource, a source of knowledge about things beyond the galaxy's edge. The Ordo Xenos would pay dearly for the chance to study you. But I also can't release you, because your power and philosophy make you an active threat to Imperial stability." Voke walked to the cell's door, then paused. "So I'm going to do something I rarely do. I'm going to give you a choice. Option 1. I keep you in containment indefinitely while the Ordo Xenos vivisects your mind and body in pursuit of knowledge. You'll live after a fashion. You'll never be free, but you'll contribute to humanity's understanding of the universe." He looked back over his shoulder. Option 2. I release you into the custody of the Death Watch, a special unit of space marines, transhuman warriors, who hunt the worst Xenos threats in the galaxy. They operate on the fringes in places where imperial law is flexible. Serve with them. Use your power to fight the enemies of humanity. Prove that your strength can serve something greater than your own ego. And if I refuse both? Voke's smile returned. Then option 3. I execute you right now and tell my superiors you were a demon in disguise. Your ashes will be scattered in space, and your name will be expunged from all records. He opened the door. You have until I return to decide. I suggest you consider carefully. In the Imperium, we don't often offer second chances. The door closed with a heavy clang, leaving Eren alone in the cell with his thoughts and the fading echo of that golden figure's judgment. You do not belong here, but he was here anyway, and the question was, what would he do about it? The cell door opened 6 hours later. Eren had spent that time testing his restraints methodically, searching for weaknesses, replaying every moment since his arrival. The manacles held. The dampeners continued their low hum, ready to punish any attempt at transformation. His body had healed the superficial wounds, the burns, the chainsword gash, but exhaustion sat in his bones like lead weight. He'd made his decision 3 hours ago. The rest was just waiting. Voke entered alone, carrying a data slate under one arm. His mechanical eye clicked through its focusing sequence as it scanned Eren's vital signs. Your heart rate is elevated, the Inquisitor observed. Fear? Anger? Anticipation? I'll serve, Eren said flatly. Voke's human eye narrowed. That was quick. I expected more resistance, more demands for explanation. Most subjects in your position attempt negotiation. I need to understand this place. Eren met his gaze. These demons you showed me, the forces threatening humanity here. I need to see them for myself. Need to know if what you told me was truth or just more propaganda to justify your chains. And if it is truth, then I'll fight them. Eren's voice hardened. I didn't come this far, sacrifice everything I did, just to watch humanity get torn apart by things from another dimension. If your Imperium is really all that stands between survival and extinction, then I'll see that for myself. How pragmatic. Voke set the data slate on the table and tapped it, bringing up lines of text in that incomprehensible script. The Death Watch operates under the Ordo Xenos of the Holy Inquisition. They are drawn from various Space Marine chapters, the Adepta Astartes, humanity's finest warriors. Each one is a transhuman killing machine, psycho-indoctrinated for absolute loyalty, equipped with the Imperium's most advanced war gear. He looked up. You will not be one of them. You are not gene-forged, not indoctrinated, and your loyalty is questionable at best. You'll serve as an auxiliary asset. Expendable. Deniable. When you die, and you will die, boy, the Death Watch's casualty rates are catastrophic. Your death will be recorded as asset malfunction and filed away without ceremony. I've been expendable before, Eren said. No doubt. Voke keyed another command into the data slate. There are conditions. First, you will wear a compliance collar at all times. It monitors your vital signs and psychic activity. If you attempt unauthorized transformation or if the collar detects warp corruption, it will detonate. The shape charge is calibrated to sever your spinal column at the brainstem. You'll be dead before you hit the ground. Eren said nothing. Second, you will obey all orders from your Deathwatch handler without question or hesitation. Failure to comply results in summary execution. Third, you will not speak of your origins to anyone outside the Ordo Xenos command structure. As far as the Imperium is concerned, you are a sanctioned combat psyker of unknown provenance. Any deviation from this cover story will be treated as a security breach. Voke produced a collar from his robes, dull gray metal studded with nodes and a blinking red light. He approached Eren's suspended form. Once this is on, you belong to the Imperium. You'll serve until you're killed, until you're judged no longer useful, or until I personally deem you worthy of release. Which, to be clear, will likely never happen. His mechanical eye focused on Eren's face. This is your last chance to choose option 1. Containment and study. At least that way you'd live longer. Eren turned his head, exposing his neck. Put it on. The collar snapped shut with a metallic click. Immediately Eren felt it. A subtle pressure at the base of his skull, a reminder that death was now millimeters from his brainstem. The red light on the collar blinked once, then turned green. Voke keyed a release command. The manacles opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Eren dropped to the floor, his legs nearly buckling, but he forced himself upright through sheer will. Your first assignment, Voke said, returning to the table and lifting his data slate, begins immediately. There's a situation developing in the Ghoul Stars, a region on the eastern fringe where warp storms have been intensifying for decades. A Deathwatch kill team is being assembled to investigate reports of Xenos activity near a dead world designated Typhon Mortis. You'll accompany them as auxiliary. He pulled up an image on the slate. A planet, gray and cratered, its atmosphere stripped away millennia ago, and orbiting it barely visible against the black structures. Massive, geometric, utterly wrong in their proportions. Necron tomb structures, Voke said quietly. The soulless remnants of a civilization that died and refused to stay dead. They are... He paused, considering his words. Imagine if death itself gained sentience and decided to reclaim the galaxy it once ruled. That's the Necrons. They don't conquer. They don't negotiate. They simply erase anything that has the audacity to exist on what they consider their property. Eren studied the image. The structures looked ancient beyond comprehension, and yet pristine. No weathering, no decay, as if time itself had no power over them. Why send me? Because the kill team's primary objective is reconnaissance and containment. But if those tomb structures are activating, if the Necrons are waking, then containment won't be enough. We'll need raw, destructive power. Voke's expression was unreadable. You demonstrated that power in the Underhive. Let's see if you can direct it against something that actually deserves annihilation. He handed Eren a bundle of clothing. Black combat fatigues marked with the inquisitorial seal, reinforced boots, and a long coat of some material that felt like leather but was lighter and stronger. No armor. No weapons beyond a combat knife. Dress. You have 10 minutes before transport arrives. Voke moved toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. The Astartes you'll be serving with don't expect camaraderie. To them, you're barely human, a mutant with useful abilities. They'll work with you because orders demand it, but they won't trust you. They won't mourn you. And if you show even a hint of corruption, they'll kill you themselves without waiting for my authorization. Good, Eren said, pulling on the fatigues. I don't need friends. I need enemies to fight. Voke actually laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Oh, you'll have those in abundance. The galaxy is rather generous with enemies. He left, the door sealing behind him with a pneumatic hiss. Eren finished dressing. The clothes fit poorly, sized for someone broader in the shoulders, but they were functional. He ran his fingers along the compliance collar, feeling the seams, the nodes, the kill charge waiting patiently to end him. Another cage, another leash, but cages could be broken. Leashes could be cut. Just not yet. First, he needed to learn, to understand this nightmare place he'd been thrown into, to see if what Voke claimed was truth or just sophisticated propaganda. And if these Necrons were really as dangerous as the Inquisitor suggested, well, Eren had killed Titans, had commanded them, had trampled civilizations beneath their feet. What was one more monster? 12 hours later, Deathwatch battle barge terminus EST, high orbit above Sanctum Celestis. The transport had been brutal, a gun cutter designed for rapid insertion, not comfort. Eren had spent the flight strapped into a crash harness next to servitors. He'd learned the word from the pilot's casual mention. Half human, half-machine creatures that performed menial tasks with vacant expressions and surgical scars where their personalities had been. They lobotomized their own people, he'd thought, watching one servitor mechanically adjust fuel feeds with hands that still had fingerprints. Turn them into living tools. Now he stood in the briefing chamber of something called a battle barge, a warship so massive that its interior corridors could fit entire city blocks. The chamber was stark, bare metal walls, a hololith projector in the center showing the tactical display of Typhon Mortis, and 5 figures that made Eren's instincts scream danger. Space Marines. He'd been told about them, but seeing them was different. Each one stood over 7 feet tall even without their armor, which they currently wore, massive suits of ceramite painted in different colors and marked with different symbols. One was black with a silver arm. Another was deep blue with yellow trim. A third was blood red with gold accents. The fourth was bone white with black trim. The fifth was the largest, his armor midnight black with a red cross on the shoulder, and he wore a helmet that completely obscured his face. A skull mask, stylized and brutal. That one stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was processed through vox grills, deep and emotionless. I am Watch Sergeant Tiberius of the Black Templars, seconded to the Death Watch. You are the auxiliary asset designated in Inquisitor Voke's briefing. The helmet turned, scanning Eren head to toe. Explain your combat capabilities. Eren met the gaze of those red eye lenses. I transform, become larger, stronger, faster. Regenerate from wounds that would kill a normal human. In my full form, I'm 15 meters tall with proportional strength. Silence. Then one of the other Marines, the one in blue, laughed. A harsh, mocking sound. 15 meters? Brother Sergeant, this is the asset? A half-trained psyker with delusions of, You will be silent, Brother Theron, Tiberius said without turning. The Inquisitor's orders are absolute. If he says this one is useful, we will treat him as such until he proves otherwise. The blue-armored Marine, Theron, fell silent, but Eren could feel the contempt radiating from him even through the armor. Tiberius gestured to the hololith. Tactical situation. Typhon Mortis shows signs of Necron awakening. Scanning detected energy signatures consistent with tomb activation protocols. Our mission is 3-phase. Phase 1, orbital insertion via drop pod to the planet's surface. Phase 2, reconnaissance of the primary tomb structure. Phase 3, if containment is impossible, we collapse the tomb's entrance and extract for orbital bombardment. The Marine in red spoke next, his voice surprisingly cultured. The asset's regenerative capabilities may prove useful if we encounter Gauss weaponry. Necron technology excels at molecular disintegration, wounds that even our catalepsian nodes struggle to compensate for. Agreed, Brother Aurelius, Tiberius said. He looked back at Eren. You will accompany us in the drop pod. You will follow orders without question. You will not engage unless commanded. If you disobey, if you panic, if you show signs of corruption, I will execute you personally. Am I understood? Eren had faced many things in his life. He'd stared down the colossal titan. He'd fought the Warhammer. He'd activated the rumbling while the entire world screamed for his death. But something about the absolute certainty in Tiberius's processed voice made it clear. This was not a threat. This was a statement of fact. If Eren failed, he would die. No hesitation. No mercy. Understood, he said. Good. Tiberius turned to his squad. Brothers, to the drop bay. The machine spirit reports optimal insertion window in 20 minutes. We deploy on my mark. The Marines filed out with mechanical precision, their massive forms moving with disturbing grace. Eren followed, the compliance collar's light blinking green against his neck, and tried not to think about how small he felt next to these transhuman warriors. The drop bay was a cathedral of war. Dozens of pods lined the walls, each one an armored coffin designed to punch through planetary atmospheres and deliver its payload directly to the combat zone. Servitors scurried between them, performing final checks, their vacant eyes registering nothing. Tiberius's kill team moved to one pod marked with the Deathwatch symbol, a silver arm against a black field. Inside were restraint harnesses sized for space marines. Eren's spot was a smaller human-sized seat welded to the floor between them. "Strap in," the bone-white marine said. His voice carried a strange accent, almost musical. "The descent is unpleasant for baseline humans. Try not to vomit inside your helmet. The stench lingers." "I don't have a helmet," Eren said, settling into the harness. The marine's helmet turned toward him. Even through the lenses, Eren could feel surprise. "The Inquisitor sent you into a potential combat zone without proper equipment?" "The Inquisitor," said the silver-armed marine, the one who'd been silent until now, "considers him expendable, as should we all." The harnesses locked with heavy clangs. Tiberius's voice came through helmet vox. "All units, secure for drop. Asset, if you survive the descent, stay behind me during initial contact. Necron weapons are unforgiving of exposure." The pod's door began to seal. Through the narrowing gap, Eren caught one last glimpse of the battle barge's interior. Servitors still working, gun emplacements tracking invisible threats, and everywhere, those symbols of the two-headed eagle. Then the door slammed shut. Darkness. The sound of his own breathing mixing with the marine's regular respiratory patterns. A countdown in that incomprehensible language, and then the drop pod launched. Eren's stomach tried to exit through his spine. The acceleration was crushing, savage, turning his body into dead weight pressed against the restraints. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only endure as the pod screamed through the void and hit Typhon Mortis's non-existent atmosphere. Except there was atmosphere now. Thin, green-tinged, toxic. The pod's exterior hull glowed cherry red from friction, and Eren could hear the metal groaning, could feel the heat bleeding through despite the insulation. "This is insane," some distant part of his mind observed. "They do this regularly. They drop from orbit in metal coffins and just trust they'll survive." Thunder. Not from weather, from retrothrusters firing, trying to slow their descent from terminal velocity to merely catastrophic. The pod shook like it was being beaten by invisible hammers. One of the Marines was chanting something, a prayer maybe, his voice steady despite the violence. "By his will we descend. By his grace we endure. By his wrath we deliver judgment." Impact. The world became pain and noise. The restraints dug into Eren's chest hard enough to crack ribs. His head snapped forward, then back, vision whiting out. Blood in his mouth. The copper taste mixing with the acrid smell of scorched metal and promethium. Then silence. The pod door exploded outward, blown clear by shaped charges. Gray light flooded in. Not sunlight, but something artificial, cold and flat. The Marines were already moving, their harnesses releasing instantly, weapons coming up in synchronized motions. Tiberius's voice, "Asset, on your feet." Movement. Eren's harness released. He stumbled forward, his legs weak, his regeneration already working on the cracked ribs. He emerged from the pod into hell. Typhon Mortis. The planet's surface was wrong. The ground was metal. Not worked metal like the Underhive's grating or the cathedral walls, but something seamless, as if the entire planet had been cast from a single mold. It stretched in all directions, perfectly flat, broken only by geometric structures that rose at precise intervals. Pyramids, obelisks, things with too many sides. The sky, if it could be called that, was a dome of energy, green and flickering, casting everything in sickly illumination. And in the distance, maybe 2 kilometers away, the tomb structure from Voke's data slate. Up close it was even more impossible, a building that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3, its edges sharp enough to cut reality. Auspex confirms no immediate hostiles, the Blue Marine Theron reported. But power signatures are increasing. Something inside is waking. Then we don't have much time. Tiberius chambered around in his bolter, a weapon that looked like it could punch through tank armor.
Formation Delta.
Asset, center position. We move fast and quiet. The moment we're detected, stealth becomes irrelevant. Brothers. He didn't finish the sentence. The ground beneath them rippled. Not like an earthquake, like water disturbed by something rising from beneath. The metal surface flowed apart, and from the opening came them. Skeletal figures of living metal, each one humanoid but wrong, too tall, too thin, joints that bent at angles bones couldn't match. Their eyes were green flames set in fleshless skulls. In their hands, rifles that looked like they'd been grown rather than built, organic and technological at once. Necron warriors, 20 of them, then 40, then more, rising from beneath the planet's surface like corpses clawing from graves. Contact, Tiberius roared. Purge them in his name. The bolters spoke. And Eren, for the first time since arriving in this nightmare galaxy, finally understood what kind of war he'd been dragged into. The Necrons didn't charge. They didn't shout war cries or show fear. They simply raised their weapons, those Gauss flares, and fired. Green lightning arced across the space between the two forces. Where it touched metal, that metal ceased to exist. Not melted or vaporized, but unmade, disintegrated at the molecular level. One beam clipped the edge of the drop pod. A meter-wide section of armored hull simply vanished, leaving a perfectly smooth crater. The Space Marines scattered with inhuman speed, their training and transhuman reflexes moving them faster than Eren's eyes could track. Bolters roared, each round a miniature missile that hit a Necron warrior and exploded, blowing the skeletal frame apart in showers of green sparks. But the Necrons didn't fall. Their bodies hit the ground in pieces, and then those pieces began crawling back together, reassembling with mechanical precision. Limbs reattached, torsos reformed. Within seconds, warriors the Marines had destroyed were standing again, raising their weapons for another volley. They're regenerating. Theron's voice was edged with something that might have been concern. Focus fire. Complete molecular disruption. Eren stood frozen for exactly 2 seconds, watching this exchange of inhuman violence. Then instinct overrode shock. He bit down on his hand, tasting blood, feeling that connection to the paths, distant but present, and pulled. The lightning came. The compliance collar shrieked a warning, electricity arcing across the nodes, but Eren pushed through the pain. His body exploded outward, bones lengthening, muscles erupting from his frame in grotesque flowering masses. Steam filled the air as his 15-meter attack titan form took shape, the partial transformation from the Underhive now complete. He landed in a crouch between 2 Necron warriors, his massive hands sweeping out in arcs that caught both skeletal frames and crushed them. Metal screamed. Green lightning discharged wildly as the warriors' power cores ruptured. But they were already reforming. Eren didn't give them the chance. He brought his foot down on one warrior's torso, grinding it into the metal surface of the planet until the pieces were too small to reassemble. The other he grabbed and pulled, tearing it in half with a wet metallic shriek, then throwing the halves in opposite directions. Asset is engaged. That was the Red Marine Aurelius. Covering fire. More bolter rounds screamed past Eren's head, each one finding a Necron warrior and detonating with precise lethality. The bone-white Marine had produced a flamer, not the crude human version from the Underhive Cathedral, but something that burned with heat intense enough to turn metal to slag. He swept it across a cluster of warriors, and this time when they fell, they stayed down, their self-repair mechanisms overwhelmed by the sheer thermal damage. Eren felt it then, the rush of combat, the clarity that came from having a clear enemy and the power to destroy them. This wasn't like fighting Marley's soldiers, who screamed and begged and died like humans. This wasn't like crushing civilians under colossal Titan feet, knowing they were innocent. These things were already dead. They were machines wearing the corpses of a civilization, and destroying them didn't carry the weight of guilt. He tore into them with savage efficiency, his titan hands crushing, tearing, grinding Necron warriors into component atoms. Steam billowed from his body as regeneration compensated for the Gauss flare hits that carved chunks from his flesh. It hurt. God, it hurt, like being burned and frozen simultaneously, but pain was just sensation, and sensation could be ignored. Push forward. Tiberius's voice cut through the chaos. The tomb entrance. We need to reach it before reinforcements arrive. Eren glanced toward the structure. It was closer now, maybe a kilometer, its impossible geometry seeming to pull at his vision. And around its base, more figures were emerging, hundreds, thousands. An army of skeletal warriors and larger constructs that looked like floating barges covered in weapons. "Run!" the silver-armed Marine shouted. He was firing his bolter one-handed while his silver arm, which Eren now realized was entirely mechanical, wielded a power sword that crackled with blue energy. Each swing bisected a Necron warrior cleanly, the blade disrupting their molecular bonds faster than they could repair. "We're outnumbered 50-1. The kill team moved. Not retreat. Space Marines apparently didn't retreat, but tactical withdrawal toward the tomb structure. They laid down covering fire as they ran. Each Marine a perfect killing machine. Their movements synchronized without need for vocal communication. Eren followed, his titan strides eating distance but making him a massive target. Gauss fire converged on him from multiple angles, carving away chunks of muscle, exposing bone beneath. His regeneration was slowing, the damage incoming faster than he could heal, and the compliance collar was still shrieking its warning, threatening to detonate if he pushed his transformation any harder. Not yet, he thought grimly. Just a little further. The ground erupted. Not with Necron warriors. With something worse. It was massive, easily 50 meters tall, a construct of living metal that looked like a centipede crossed with a spider and a nightmare. Dozens of legs propelled it across the surface with horrifying speed. Its body bristled with weapons. Gauss cannons, particle whips, things Eren had no names for but recognized as death. And its eyes, those terrible green flames, fixed on him. "Tomb Stalker." Theron's voice actually carried fear now. "Fall back. Fall back." The thing moved. One moment it was 50 meters away. The next it was on top of Eren, its legs spearing down like lances. He threw himself aside but wasn't fast enough. One leg punched through his Titan form's torso, erupting from his back in a spray of blood and steam. Eren roared, his hands grabbing the leg and pulling. The metal bent but didn't break. The Tomb Stalker's head dipped, and one of its weapons fired point blank. A beam of concentrated energy that carved through Eren's shoulder and took his left arm off entirely. The limb hit the ground and began dissolving, unraveling at the molecular level. Not regenerating, Eren realized with cold horror. That weapon, it's stopping the regeneration. The Space Marines were firing everything they had at the construct, bolter rounds and plasma bolts and even the Flamer's superhot spray, but it was like attacking a mountain. The Tomb Stalker's armor shrugged off the impacts, and it was already preparing another shot. Tiberius acted. The watch sergeant leaped, his jump pack firing with a roar of thrust, carrying his massive armored form up and onto the Tomb Stalker's back. His power fist, a weapon that looked like an oversized gauntlet crackling with energy, plunged into the construct's spine. Thunder, light, the sound of reality screaming as the power fist's disruptor field met the Tomb Stalker's living metal. For one frozen moment, nothing happened. Then the construct's entire midsection exploded, blown apart from the inside, its legs going limp as its control systems disintegrated. The massive body collapsed. Tiberius rode it down, his armor scorched but intact, and when he hit the ground he was already turning, already scanning for the next threat. "Move!" he bellowed. "To the tomb! Now!" They ran. Eren's Titan form was failing, the wounds too severe, the energy expenditure too great. He felt himself shrinking, his body reverting to human dimensions, but the Marines didn't wait. The silver-armed one, whose name Eren still didn't know, grabbed him bodily and threw him forward, sending him tumbling across the metal surface toward the tomb entrance. Behind them, the Necron army advanced like a tide of skeletal death, thousands of warriors moving in perfect synchronization, their Gauss flares painting the air green with molecular disintegration. The tomb entrance loomed, an archway of impossible geometry that seemed to fold space, its interior pitch black despite the ambient light. Symbols covered its surface, not the imperial eagles but older glyphs, mathematical and cold. The Marines hit the entrance at full sprint and plunged through. Eren followed, tumbling across the threshold, and fell into darkness that had teeth. The darkness was absolute. Not the absence of light. Eren had experienced that before, in the underground city beneath the capital, in the depths of forests at night. This was something active, a darkness that pressed against his eyes like physical weight, that seemed to drink in sound and warmth and leave only cold silence. He hit the ground hard, the impact driving air from his lungs. The surface beneath him was smooth, impossibly so, like polished glass but somehow organic. His hands scrabbled for purchase and found none. Just that same seamless texture stretching in all directions. Asset, sound off. Tiberius's voice cut through the darkness, processed and flat. Confirm status. Alive? Eren managed, pushing himself to his knees. His body ached in a dozen places where Gauss fire had carved chunks from his Titan form. The regeneration was slow, too slow. Whatever that tombstalker's weapon had done to him, the effect was lingering. Brothers, status report. Aurelius, functional. Minor armor damage. Primary systems operational. Theron, combat effective. Auspex is reading. Anomalous returns. This structure's interior exceeds its external dimensions by a factor of a pause. That can't be right. Brother Kale, operational. That was the bone-white Marine. But we have a problem. The entrance we came through, it's gone. Eren turned, searching for the archway they'd tumbled through moments ago. There was nothing, just smooth walls rising into darkness, unbroken and seamless. Necron phase shift technology, the silver-armed Marine said quietly. His name was Mordecai. Eren had heard it during the drop. The tomb recognized our intrusion and sealed itself. We're inside their domain now. A sound echoed through the darkness. Not mechanical, not organic. Something between. A vibration that Eren felt in his teeth, in his bones, that made his newly healed wounds ache. It was rhythmic, like breathing, like a heartbeat magnified 1,000 times. Contact imminent, Tiberius said. Formation Theta. Asset, stay in the center. Do not transform unless ordered. Your collar's proximity alert will detonate if warp energy signatures spike in this confined space. Eren's hand went instinctively to the collar around his neck. The light was still green, but he could feel it now, a tension in the device, as if it was poised on the edge of activation. Then light came, not from external sources. The walls themselves began to glow, a pale green luminescence that spread through the material like bioluminescence through deep-sea organisms. The light revealed the space they'd entered. A corridor, easily 50 meters wide and stretching ahead into infinite distance. The walls were covered in glyphs, not carved but somehow grown, as if the metal had been convinced to reshape itself into mathematical expressions. And they weren't alone. Figures stood in alcoves along the walls. Hundreds of them, thousands maybe, each one a skeletal frame of living metal in various states of assembly. Some were complete, their green eye flames dormant but present. Others were partial, torsos without limbs, heads without bodies, components floating in precise arrangement as if held by invisible threads. Stasis crypts, Aurelius whispered. Emperor, preserve us. This isn't just a tomb, it's a resurrection chamber. If these activate simultaneously, then we move faster. Tiberius cut him off. Kale, take point. Theron, rear guard. Mordecai, watch our flanks. We find the tomb's control node and collapse it from within. That's the mission. The kill team moved as one, their ceramite boots making no sound on the impossibly smooth floor. Eren followed, acutely aware of how vulnerable he was. No armor, no weapons except the combat knife at his belt, and his Titan transformation locked behind the compliance collar's kill switch. I've been in worse situations, he told himself. The cavern beneath Rice Chapel, the basement in Liberio. I survived those, but those places had been his world. This was something else, something older. As they moved deeper into the tomb, Eren could feel it. A presence vast and patient and utterly inhuman, watching them with the attention a scientist might give to bacteria under a microscope. The corridor opened into a chamber. It was massive, the ceiling lost in darkness hundreds of meters overhead, the walls curving away to form a perfect sphere. At the chamber's center floated an object that hurt to look at. A polyhedron of black metal with too many sides, rotating slowly on multiple axes simultaneously. Green energy arced from its surface to contact points on the walls, ceiling, and floor, and where that energy touched, glyphs ignited in cascading patterns. The control node, Mordecai said. Necron command protocols route through central crystalline matrices. Destroy that, and the tomb's awakening sequence should abort. Should? Eren asked. Necron technology operates on principles we don't fully understand, Aurelius admitted. Sometimes destroying a control node works. Sometimes it triggers failsafes. Sometimes, the polyhedron stopped rotating. The arcs of green energy intensified, multiplying, weaving patterns through the air that formed shapes, geometric impossibilities that existed in spaces Eren's eyes couldn't quite track. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost formed on the Marine's armor, and from the alcoves lining the chamber's walls, the dormant Necron warriors began to wake. Green flames ignited in hundreds of eye sockets. Skeletal hands flexed, testing joints that hadn't moved in millennia. The partial constructs began pulling themselves together, components floating through the air to snap into place with mechanical precision. Contact! Tiberius roared. All units, weapons free. Destroy that control node. The Marines opened fire. Bolter rounds streaked across the chamber, detonating against the polyhedron's surface in flowers of fire and shrapnel. Plasma bolts followed, superhot streams that should have melted any material known to Imperial science. But the polyhedron's surface simply absorbed the impacts, the energy dissipating across its impossible geometry like water flowing over glass. And the Necron warriors advanced. They moved with eerie synchronization, hundreds of skeletal forms stepping from their alcoves and raising Gauss flares as one. The first volley came like green lightning, a storm of molecular disintegration that forced the Marines to scatter. Eren pressed himself against the chamber wall, searching for any advantage, any opening. His hand went to his mouth, habit, instinct, but he stopped before biting down. The collar was still green, but Tiberius's warning echoed in his mind. Do not transform unless ordered. But watching the Marines fight was like watching demigods battle impossible odds. Tiberius moved like death incarnate, his power fist crushing Necron skulls with each strike, his bolter barking precisely timed shots that detonated warriors mid-stride. Aurelius wielded his weapons with aristocratic grace, each movement economical and lethal. Kale's flamer turned entire sections of the chamber into molten slag. Theron's tactical awareness kept them from being flanked, his shots surgical in their precision. And Mordecai, his silver arm moved independently from the rest of him, parrying Gauss fire with his power sword while his bolter cleared approach vectors. But there were too many. For every warrior destroyed, two more emerged from alcoves deeper in the chamber. The Marines were being pushed back, forced into a defensive circle, their ammunition counters dropping toward critical. Brother Sergeant, Aurelius's voice carried strain for the first time. Ammunition at 15%. Recommend. A section of floor between the Marines and the control node folded. Not opened. folded, space itself inverting like origami, and through the impossible gap came something that made the tombstalker look like a toy. It stood 20 meters tall, a construct of living metal that vaguely resembled a humanoid but wrong in every proportion. Its arms were too long, ending in claws that crackled with energy. Its head was an elongated oval covered in sensory nodes, and its chest cavity was hollow, revealing a sphere of roiling green energy contained by invisible force. And it was aware. Eren could see it in the way those sensory nodes tracked each marine individually, processing their movements, calculating threats. Lichguard, Mordecai shouted. Tomb Guardian construct. Fall back. The construct moved with speed that defied its size. One moment it stood at the chamber's center. The next it was among them, its claws carving through the air faster than eyes could track. Eren tried to dodge. Too slow. The claw caught his shoulder plate and tore, ceramite parting like paper. The Marine stumbled, his arm hanging useless, blood streaming from the joint seals. Tiberius interposed himself, his power fist meeting the construct's next strike in a thunderclap of energy. For a moment they were locked, transhuman strength against alien technology, and then the construct shoved, sending Tiberius sliding backward across the smooth floor. Asset. The watch sergeant's voice was tight. Authorization granted. Transform and engage. Eren didn't hesitate. He bit down on his hand, hard enough to feel bone, and this time when he pulled on that connection to the paths, he didn't hold back. The lightning came like a storm. The compliance collar shrieked its alarm, electricity arcing wildly across the nodes. But Eren pushed through the pain, through the warning, pouring everything he had into the transformation. His body exploded outward, 15 meters of muscle and sinew and regenerating flesh erupting into existence. The attack titan's roar shook the chamber. Eren didn't waste time on tactics or strategy. The Lichguard had its back to him, a mistake if something that calculated could make mistakes. He closed the distance in 2 strides and brought both fists down on the construct's head with every ounce of titan strength he possessed. The impact was like artillery fire. The Lichguard's head crumpled, sensory nodes shattering, the metal frame buckling under the force. But it didn't fall. It spun impossibly fast for something so damaged, and one claw carved across Eren's torso in a horizontal slash. Pain. Incredible white-hot pain as the energy-wreathed claw didn't just cut but disrupted. The wound refusing to close, his regeneration stuttering around the edges. Just like the Tombstalker's weapon, Eren realized. They have something that stops healing. No time for analysis. The Lichguard's other claw was already moving, aiming for his throat. Eren caught the wrist, barely, his titan hands wrapping around the construct's arm and squeezing. Metal groaned. The claw's energy discharge flickered. The chest cavity. Aurelius's voice cut through the chaos. The power core is exposed. Target the sphere. Eren saw it, that roiling green energy, unprotected, pulsing with whatever force animated this dead thing. He released the construct's wrist and plunged his hand directly into the hollow chest cavity. His fingers closed around the sphere. It was like grabbing lightning. Energy coursed up Eren's arm, burning through muscle, scorching bone. The pain so intense his vision whited out. But he didn't let go. He pulled, wrenching the sphere from its containment field, feeling the construct convulse as its power source was ripped away. The sphere detonated. Green fire exploded outward in a wave that sent Eren flying backward, his titan form tumbling across the chamber floor. When he hit the wall, he felt ribs crack, felt his left arm disintegrate from the shoulder down, felt burns covering every inch of exposed flesh. But the Lichguard was down. Its frame lay crumpled and sparking, the hollow chest cavity dark, the sensory nodes lifeless. Asset. Collapse your form. Tiberius's voice was barely audible over the ringing in Eren's ears. The collar is at critical. Eren let the transformation drop. His human body reformed, naked and burned and bleeding, and he collapsed to his knees gasping. The compliance collar was screaming now, its light flickering between green and red, and Eren could feel the kill charge warming against his skin. Going to detonate, some distant part of his mind observed. Pushed it too far. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Kale, the bone-white marine, had reached him. The Astartes did something to the collar with a tool from his belt. Eren heard a sharp click, and the alarm cut off. The light stabilized at green. "Emergency override," Kale said quietly. "You're welcome. Try not to make me regret this." Around them, the chamber had gone quiet. The Necron warriors had stopped advancing. Not destroyed, but simply halted, as if waiting for instructions that were no longer coming. The control node's polyhedron continued to rotate, but the energy arcs had dimmed. "The Lich Guard was coordinating them," Mordecai said, studying his auspex. "Without its command protocols, the warriors have reverted to autonomous defense mode. They'll still attack if we approach them, but they're not actively hunting us anymore. Then we complete the mission while we have the chance." Tiberius reloaded his bolter with smooth efficiency despite the damage to his armor. Aurelius Mordecai anti-armor munitions on that control node. Concentrated fire. Theron, Kale, maintain perimeter. Asset. He looked at Eren, who was struggling to his feet, his regeneration slowly knitting the worst of the burns. "You did well," the watch sergeant said. It wasn't praise, more a statement of observed fact. "Rest. We'll handle the rest." Eren wanted to argue, to insist he could still fight, but his body had other ideas. He slumped against the chamber wall, watching as Aurelius and Mordecai advanced on the control node with weapons Eren hadn't seen them use before. Angular rifles that looked like they'd been built from crystallized light. "Melta weapons," Kale explained, seeing Eren's confusion. "Microwave radiation focused to a molecular level. If bolter rounds won't crack that thing, these will." The two Marines fired simultaneously. Twin beams of superheated radiation lanced across the chamber and struck the polyhedron dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the polyhedron began to scream. Not with sound, with light, with energy, with something that resonated in frequencies Eren's ears couldn't process but his bones could feel. The rotation accelerated, became chaotic, the impossible geometry folding in on itself. Cracks appeared in the black metal, spreading like lightning, and from those cracks poured light so bright it hurt to look at. "Fall back," Tiberius roared. "All units, take cover." The Marines moved. Eren tried to follow, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He managed 3 steps before collapsing, his regeneration not keeping pace with the damage he'd sustained. Kale was there again, hauling Eren bodily behind a section of collapsed alcove. The other Marines found their own cover just as the polyhedron reached critical mass. The explosion was silent. That was what struck Eren first. No sound, just a wave of force that felt like being hit by a colossal titan's footfall, that lifted him off the ground and slammed him into the wall hard enough to crack stone. His vision fragmented, his hearing cut out. For a moment he was floating in silence, watching debris rain down in slow motion, watching the chamber's walls crack and buckle. Then sound rushed back in like a tidal wave. The roar of collapsing architecture. The screams of tortured metal as the tomb structure began to fail. The crackle of energy discharges as centuries-old systems overloaded and died. And beneath it all, that rhythmic sound. The breathing, the heartbeat, growing fainter, slower, until finally it stopped. "Move! Move!" Tiberius was hauling Theron upright, the injured Marine clutching his ruined shoulder. "The tomb is collapsing. Back to the entrance point." The entrance sealed itself. Aurelius shouted over the chaos. "We need another." "There." Mordecai pointed with his silver arm. Where the control node had been, the floor was opening. Not a doorway but a shaft, dropping straight down into darkness. "Maintenance access. It's our only chance." They ran. Eren was dragged more than he ran, Kale supporting half his weight while maintaining a combat-ready posture with his flamer. Around them, the Necron warriors were collapsing. Not destroyed but deactivating, their eye flames guttering out as the tomb's power grid failed. Some crumbled to dust. Others simply froze in place, their frames locked in whatever position they'd held when the shutdown hit. The shaft was a vertical drop, no stairs, no ladder. Just smooth walls descending into absolute darkness. "Jump!" Tiberius ordered. "Trust your armor. Trust your training. Trust him." And he jumped. The other Marines followed without hesitation. Aurelius, Theron, despite his injury. Mordecai, Cale still supporting Eren. "Can you regenerate from a fall?" Cale asked. "I don't know," Eren admitted. "Then hold on." They jumped together. The fall lasted forever and no time at all. Darkness swallowed them. Wind screamed past. Eren felt Cale's armor adjust mid-fall, thrusters firing to slow their descent. And then, impact. They hit water. Not water, some liquid that was denser, more viscous, that glowed with faint bioluminescence. Eren's lungs burned. His vision was nothing but murky green. He felt Cale's grip loosen, felt himself sinking, and then hands, human-sized hands not armored, grabbed his collar and pulled. They broke the surface gasping. "Everyone sound off." Tiberius's voice, closer now. Aurelius, functional. Theron, compromised but mobile. Mordecai, operational. Cale, combat effective. Asset is with me, alive. They were in a chamber, smaller than the control node room, its walls covered in what looked like circuit boards grown from organic material. The liquid they floated in filled the chamber to waist height for the Marines, chest height for Eren. And ahead, barely visible in the bioluminescence, a doorway. Not sealed, not locked, just open. "That leads to the surface," Mordecai reported, studying his auspex. "I'm reading open air beyond. We're directly beneath our insertion point. Then we move before this entire structure comes down on our heads." Tiberius waded toward the doorway, his damaged armor trailing sparks. "Asset, can you walk?" Eren tested his legs. They held. Barely. "Yes. Good. Because I'm not carrying you." They emerged from the tomb into gray light, that same artificial illumination from before, but flickering now, unstable. The metal surface of Typhon Mortis was cracking, vast fissures opening to reveal the tomb's structure beneath. In the distance, other pyramids and obelisks were sinking into the planet's surface, pulled down by some gravitational force Eren couldn't identify. "The tomb's collapse is triggering a chain reaction," Aurelius said. "The entire complex is being pulled into—" "What? Subspace? A pocket dimension? Does it matter?" Theron leaned heavily on Mordecai, his ruined arm hanging useless. "We completed the mission. The tomb is neutralized. Now we extract before we're neutralized with it." Tiberius activated his Vox. "Kill Team Tiberius to Terminus Estate, mission accomplished. Requesting immediate extraction at designated coordinates. Be advised, planetary surface is unstable. Recommend bombardment once we're clear. Static." Then, acknowledged Watch Sergeant. "Thunderhawk inbound, ETA 6 minutes. Prepare for hot extraction." 6 minutes. They had 6 minutes to survive on a planet that was actively trying to kill them, surrounded by Necron warriors that might reactivate at any moment, with ammunition running low and armor compromised. Eren looked at the Space Marines. These transhuman warriors who'd fought through impossible odds without hesitation, who'd trusted him enough to authorize his transformation, who'd saved his life multiple times and realized something. He still didn't trust the Imperium. Still didn't believe in their emperor or their chains or their justifications for oppression. But these 5, these warriors who fought and bled and risked everything for a mission, for their brothers, for humanity's survival against nightmares made real. Maybe, just maybe, there was something worth preserving in this nightmare galaxy after all. The Thunderhawk screamed down from orbit, its engines burning bright against the dying green sky. Its assault ramp dropped, and they ran toward salvation, battered, bloodied, but unbroken. As they lifted off, Eren watched through the viewport as the tomb complex collapsed entirely, pulled into whatever impossible space the Necrons had created. The metal surface of Typhon Mortis folded in on itself, and then even that was gone, replaced by void. "First mission complete," Tiberius said, removing his helmet to reveal a face carved from scar tissue and absolute conviction. His eyes, human eyes, surprisingly kind despite everything, studied Eren. "You survived. That makes you luckier than most assets I've worked with." "What happens now?" Eren asked. "Now?" Tiberius's smile was grim. "Now you rest, you heal, and you prepare. Because the galaxy has no shortage of monsters, boy. And whether you like it or not, you've just become one of the Imperium's weapons against them." He extended a hand. Not armored, just flesh and bone and the strength of brotherhood. "Welcome to the Death Watch." Eren stared at that hand for a long moment. Thought about walls and cages. Thought about freedom and the cost of survival. Thought about the choice he'd made and what it would mean. Then he reached out and clasped Tiberius's forearm in the warrior's grip. "I'm not doing this for your Imperium," Eren said quietly. "I'm doing this because those things, the demons, the Necrons, all of it, they're enemies of humanity. All humanity. And I won't let humanity be caged or destroyed. Not by them. Not by anyone." Tiberius's grip tightened. "Then we understand each other. The why doesn't matter, asset. Only the what. And what you do." He gestured to the viewport, to the void where Typhon Mortis had been, to the galaxy beyond filled with horrors and wars and endless, grinding survival. "Is kill the monsters. Everything else is philosophy." The Thunderhawk banked toward orbit, carrying them away from the dead world and toward whatever fresh nightmare awaited in the 41st millennium. And Eren Jaeger, who had torn down walls, who had commanded titans, who had tried to remake his world through genocide, closed his eyes and wondered if perhaps, in this galaxy where freedom itself was a lie, his war had finally found worthy enemies.